The Sega Genesis. The console well, never grew up with. To me, it represents a start in delving into the final frontier of gaming. Or, at least beyond only ever having owned a PlayStation 1 and several Nintendo consoles. In my lifetime, I've only ever seen a Sega Genesis once some 10 plus years ago when going over to a friend's house, and since I'm not a collector of physical media all that much, I kinda doubt I'll ever go out of my way to own one, so yeah, to this day it kinda lives on in my mind as almost a bit of a mythological concept. Combine that with me getting into RPGs pretty heavily within the past couple of years, and boom, last year specifically, I finally decided to finish my very first Genesis exclusive RPG. Enter Shining the Darkness, the first game in the Shining series, a series that you'd probably only ever really hear about through a friend or by literally searching up best Sega Genesis RPGs. Nowadays, the series is more fondly remembered for the later titles that would fall under the tactical strategic side of the RPG genre, but today I want to talk about its humble beginnings and why the first game is worth giving a shot at as its own unique and worthwhile experience. Who knows, maybe even you will want to give it a try. But first, let's start with who developed this game. Now, I can't really tell you too much about Climax Entertainment, but Sonic Software Planning would later come to be known as Camelot Software Planning, and yes, I mean that Camelot of Golden Sun and Mario sports games fame. Initially, that caught me off guard. Camelot? A video game developer that I thought was only ever Nintendo exclusive, literally created Waluigi, originally worked for Sega, and under the name of their mascot, no less. What a world. What's weirder is that Camelot has a pretty unvaried amount of games that they developed, most of which fall into either of these three categories: Shining games, Golden Sun games, and Mario sports games. That's it. Now, as a guy who enjoyed Golden Sun, even though I haven't finished it, and loved the RPG aspects of the Mario Tennis Game Boy Color game, yes, that's real, I felt really compelled to see what this game was all about, and honestly, it just turns out that Camelot was always capable of being that damn good. Right from the start, and I mean literally, this is the first game in this series, the first game to develop, and the start of the game, you see something that a lot of RPGs at the time didn't really do all that much. Large, animated sprites. And cartoony sprites at that. It's not even set aside for some large RPG monstrosity. By that, I mean the NPCs are actually designed well enough to look lively and expressive. All of them were even given names. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves here. First, let's get on to the plot. Basically, you assume the role of someone in this fantasy world who's on a quest to find both their dad and the princess he was searching for. In your search, you're brought to a kingdom where you're told that the princess was last seen around a local labyrinth, and you're given 200 gold in preparation for your first of many, many expeditions. Once you're off, it's at this point where you realize how small the game seems at first. You're given the choice between 3 places to go, and one of them was the castle you were just at. The other 2 are the labyrinth itself and a nearby village. And yeah, what you see is what you get. You only ever go to one town and one dungeon throughout the entire game. Now, what most people would expect would be a very hollow experience devoid of much plot, lore, and memorable characters, to instead make room for a game that's 99% dungeon, and you'd be somewhat right. First off, let's lower that 99 to 90 and realize, of course, that this town is a crucial part of the game. You're allowed to save here, stock up on items, and rest up at the local tavern. Also at the tavern, you'll meet up with a changing cast of NPC characters as the game progresses, with a pretty catchy song playing in the background to lighten up the mood while reading up on some lore. After a while, this place will start to feel like home. Anyway, let's get on to the dungeon itself and, well, the big elephant in the room. First-person view, baby, although, now that I think about it, the whole game is in a first-person view. You never really do see your character because you literally see this world through his eyes. Here's what he looks like in case you were curious, though. I guess I'm mainly highlighting the dungeon with this in particular because you can actually walk forward and change direction. Kinda like the dungeons in the first Phantasy Star game, if you've ever seen that. Now, I see how this can be a problem for some if you're not the navigator type. At first, you might not see very many landmarks, and every corner and wall might look the same, but fear not. There's a couple of items that can save you while you're venturing out alone. The Angel's Feather allows you to exit the labyrinth at any time if you can't take it anymore, or you want to save or rest up, and the Wisdom Seed brings up a map of what you've uncovered of the dungeon that updates with every step. Now, another problem. 2 actually. First off, these are consumables that you have to keep on buying, and secondly, the inventory space. Weapons and armor already take up at least 2 spaces, 4 once you're fully equipped, so you're only really left with 4 spaces for consumables and key items. But to the game's credit, it seems like it's aware of this problem and tries to fix it to some degree. In a solution that seems somewhat backwards, you can actually sell your key items and rebuy them back if you ever need them again. And I mean, that's one way of doing it. But there's also the fact that the party members who join you later on come with their own inventories. Yep, Pyra and Mifra. Milo, yeah, that's what I meant. If you haven't noticed, the main character doesn't learn any magic, so to accommodate that, you're given a wizard and a priest. One who specializes in offensive magic, and the other who specializes in healing. Shoutouts to Pyra, by the way, she gains access to the view and egress spells. View allows you to look at a map of the dungeon for 1 MP, while egress allows you to exit the dungeon at any time for 9 MP. Sound familiar? Yep, give a big old middle finger to those wisdom seeds and angel feathers and keep your inventory free for something more important. Well, maybe keep some angel feathers around for a while. Pyra actually has to level up a bit before she can allow your party to leave at any time. So those are a couple of ways to ease some of the more archaic mechanics of your typical early RPG, but how about a very big potential problem that comes with this style of gameplay? And by very big, I mean how big is this dungeon? Are we going to have to go through the very same path again and again, only to get farther with better equipment and stats? Not quite. Labyrinth is indeed a massive beast, but I can tell you with confidence that this game does a pretty good job of creating checkpoints for you after you beat certain bosses, or find key items and even people along certain paths. Whether it's in the style of a door that you can unlock after finding a key, or getting rid of a fake wall, you're rewarded with faster ways to progress after you finish certain sections, and later on you can straight up just warp to certain areas from town. But now I've kinda said too much. As for difficulty, the game can have a rather annoying encounter rate at times, and bosses straight up look like they come out of nowhere sometimes, which could potentially lead to an unprepared boss fight, but with all the grinding you do trying to explore new areas of the labyrinth, it's manageable. Unless maybe you're using a guide that has a map to try and head directly to where you want to go to beat the game as fast as possible, then maybe I can see how the game can seem kinda grindy since you're running into the tougher enemies a lot quicker than you should be. But at no point is there ever a difficulty spike that just kinda happens at random. Even if you should die, you're brought back to the priest with all your EXP and gained items intact, with only the loss of money being your punishment, instead of just having a straight up game over. Final Fantasy, I'm looking at you. But with time, you'll get familiar with the dungeon, its traps and enemies that lurk within, and you'll have more money and EXP than you know what to do with until the next staircase or a portal that leads you deeper. It sounds monotonous, but with that bumpin' soundtrack in the background, you'll find some strength and confidence you didn't have before to bum rush past everything in sight, and at the end of the day, isn't that all you want from an RPG? No. It's a nearly 30-year-old game. I'm just kinda pointing out what I like about the game while acknowledging some of its setbacks. What I'm describing might sound like more bad than good, or vice versa depending on who's listening to it. Anyways, that's all I really wanted to show, just to kind of give you a taste of what this game is like. But before I leave, let me share with you something that this game does that actually took me aback when I first saw it. Check this out. That right there put this game from a B- to a B+ in my book. Just chill. Relax. Literally vibe for a few seconds. I love that. In an era that's typically defined by horror design philosophies that still had yet to be fully fleshed out, this game gave me reassurance that someone with a heart worked on this. It serves no practical purpose, but in a way, it kinda does more than that. Even when you're far away from the more cheery and inviting environments that this game has to offer, you're never really all that far away from this game's amazing charm, and that alone is comforting. So, that's Shining in the Darkness. I don't want to say too much for those who want to give this game a shot without a guide or anything. I mean, I used a guide. Shoutouts to the fine folks over at RPG Classics. Phantasy Star 2 literally would have been impossible without y'all. But if you're ever bored and you got a lot of time on your hands for some reason, can't go wrong with this one. Whatever your playstyle, I won't judge you. Also, if you couldn't tell by these borders and all the speeding up I was doing, I played this game through the Sega Mega Drive and Genesis Classics bundle on PC, which includes a large library of essential playing if you want to get acquainted with the Sega Genesis. It also has a speed up feature that makes grinding marginally easier, so I recommend that whether you buy the game alone for a quick American buck or buy the bundle with over 50 games as a whole. Anyways, thank you for listening to my schlock. Have yourselves a great day and take care. Peace.
James, he asked, why are you red? I am red.